I am 52 years old, and my hands have learned the language of silence. The creak of a wooden spoon, the soft slap of pie dough on a floured counter, the patient tuck of a blanket over knees that go tight in the rain. My voice isn't what it used to be. Wisdom does that, carves away the high notes, but I remember each word that ever broke me, and each one I refused to let win. So pull up a chair, honey. This is a story of a house and a fence and a woman who thought she could name me. She called me a burden, and I moved next door so she could learn the weight of that word. Part 1, the porch light. The evening air smells like cut grass and lilacs that have gone a little wild. I sit on my porch in a chair my husband made before his hands learned shaking. The sky over Ohio is a low bowl, the kind that hums if you listen. On the far side of the fence, birds chatter at the feeder like ladies at a hair salon, and somewhere a screen door snaps shut. The neighborhood holds its breath. June bugs ping the bulb above me. Tap, 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 like a memory trying to get in. My granddaughter, Emma, has the recorder on the table between us. Just talk how you talk, Nana, she says. You said you wanted to finally tell this, right? Right, I say, rubbing my ring finger. The gold band lives now in the jewelry box with the postcards and the photo of me in a skirt so short your mother still shakes her head. I'll start with the truth. Lorraine didn't invent the word burden, but she made it heavy enough to break the floorboards. I can feel the world go slow, the way it does before a storm. Back then I was 21, hair like rainwater, laugh like bells. I had a brand new name, Mrs. Thomas Gallagher. I wore it the way a child wears a crown. It was 1964, and the country had big plans for itself. We were the same, Tom and I. Big plans, small apartment, a bed that squeaked when you even looked at it, and a window that faced a neon sign for a bar called Hank's. We were happy. We were poor. We were starfish stubborn. Lorraine was a different weather. Her lipstick was always perfect, even at breakfast. She carried grievance the way other women carried a purse, always on hand, pulled open when needed. She had a laugh, but it had to be coaxed like a cat. She loved her son and mistrusted the world for thinking it had any claim to him at all, including me. I met her at the church basement after the wedding. The lights were buzzing like bees, and children were skidding around until Father O'Connell hissed like a coal on water. Lorraine came straight for me, bouquet of gardenias clamped to her chest like a shield. She kissed me on both cheeks with cool lips, smiled, and said, "You're lovely, Evelyn." "That's kind of you," I said, dizzy with cake and dreams. "Lovely," she repeated, then leaned in so close I could taste her spearmint. "Lovely things are fragile. Remember that." She meant it like a blessing, or maybe a prophecy. The thing about the women of my mother's generation is they could hide a dagger in a compliment and make you thank them for the bouquet. I thought she was nervous, same as me. I didn't know that day was the first ripple of something that would grow into a wave. Years spill like sugar when you're young. We worked, we loved. We learned which neighbors would loan a cup of flour and which would report the parking violations. I lost a baby at 12 weeks, and the world made that hush again. Like a storm had passed, but forgot to leave rain. Tom held me and said the things a good man says when he knows nothing fixes nothing. We tried again and had a son, James, who came out with a fist in the air, furious at the light. I was 23 and full of milk and faith. Lorraine brought casseroles and advice, equal parts casserole and twice the advice. "You shouldn't ride buses," she'd say. "Too many people, too many germs." "You shouldn't go outside without a hat," she'd say. "Sun ages the skin." "You should put him on a schedule," she'd say, falling on my couch like a bird shot down, as if the value of my motherhood could be measured in minutes between feedings. My boy never cried because I didn't let him. That's simple. I smiled because it was easier than war. I measured my breaths in the space between her sentences. I learned the way the light fell across the carpet when she'd finally stand up to go. She meant well, I told myself. She meant well. I told Tom when he came home with grease under his nails and weak on his shoulders. She means well, I said, and I could feel the words start to chafe. Meaning well is a polite way of being wrong for a long time. Then came the layoff at the plant. The men came home early, faces the color of dishwater. Wives folded their mouths into new shapes. I sold my wedding china, the pieces we hardly used, to a woman who called me honey and paid cash, her rings clicking against the bills like small bells. We had James and Bills and hope. Hope is cheap until it's all you have. The night Tom told me we'd have to move in with his mother, I was washing the baby bottles. The sink frosted my hands. He said it like a confession, a man naming his failure, and I felt something inside me stand up and take a step back. Pride is heavy. It lives in the spine. It's just for a while, he said. Work's thin and Ma's got the room. We'll get on our feet. She asked me to ask you. She wants to help. Wants to help? I repeated in my head like a hymn sung in the wrong key. Wants to help. I imagined the walls at Lorraine's, the kitchen linoleum that not even God could loosen from that floor, the glass figurines posed on the windowsill like judges. We'll do it, I said finally, because sometimes love is agreeing to the thing you'll regret. We arrived with 6 boxes and a cradle, like refugees with a baby who didn't understand why he wasn't in his home with the smell of dawn and the screaming neon light. Lorraine opened the door with triumph tucked just behind her smile. My family, she said, gathering Tom and the baby first, her eyes skittering past me like I was a breeze that got in. Her house smelled like pledge and roast beef. A butter-yellow sofa sat in the living room like a sofa in a magazine. The rug had long fibers that swallowed your feet and tried to keep them. She took our coats and put them in a closet that smelled like mothballs and a life that didn't have room for surprises. It was fine for a week. The kindnesses wore well enough. She made us breakfast and called me dear when she needed me out of the way. Then one morning, I came into the kitchen in my housecoat, hair pinned up in a way no magazine would approve, and found Lorraine already at the table, letters spread before her. She didn't look up. Ma, Tom said carefully, pouring coffee. She said, the sound of a woman who's already had her say. She held one letter like it was proof of something. The gas, the mortgage, the new roof. Do you know how roofs creep up on a woman? One day it's right there above your head, and the next it's a bill with zeros like a row of teeth. She set the paper down, finally looking at me. I didn't plan to raise grown children. We'll pay rent, I said, my voice small and steady like a line stitched through leather. Tom and I talked about it. $40 a month while we find our feet. And I'll clean. I'll cook. That's not how it works, she said, smiling thin. Rent turns family into a business. Then what? I said gently. We won't be long. She glanced at Tom. Your father never let this family be a burden. Even when the plant cut his hours, he took another job. Graveyard shift. He didn't come home and say, Ma, let me and my wife and this squealing baby make your house smaller. Do you hear me? I did hear, but the words kept going. She reached for the baby, who burbled happily at the sound of her voice. You're a sweet one, she cooed. Then, without looking at me, she added, I suppose I finally have what I always wanted. She turned back. A baby. A house full of noise. She paused. A burden. The word hit the table and bounced. It was the size of the room. It grew a spine. It turned its head to look at me. Ma, Tom said sharp. Don't start, she snapped. I'm only telling the truth. Times are hard, and there it is. She's a burden. You both are. And we will shoulder it, of course. That's what mothers do. I will tell you now what I did not do. I did not cry. I did not storm upstairs with a bag. I had no money to fill. I did not throw a plate and watch it burst into the star I needed. I smiled, and the smile made my cheeks ache. I took my son back and held him close enough to hear the little wheeze he made when he slept. I said, thank you for your honesty. And then I went upstairs and packed the baby's clothes and my clothes and the 3 good towels and my mother's rosary and Tom's blue shirt and the courage that had lived in me since I stole apples at 9 because no one was going to tell me I couldn't have sweetness. When Tom came up, he stood in the doorway like a boy who'd found a fox in his bed. Evie, he said, low, warning and pleading and a little sorry. Don't. Tom, I said. Do you love me? He blinked. What kind of question is that? The kind that matters before the kind that breaks you, I said. Because I won't be a burden in a woman's mouth. Not for a day. Not for an hour. We will leave today. We have no money, he said. You know that. I've got a line on something at the warehouse, but the pay. Then we'll find another way, I said. We will find the way you find when someone hands you a word meant to be a chain. And we did. Not out of magic, not out of luck, but out of the ugliest, pettiest, most stubborn thing I've ever done. I moved next door. Part 2, the Thistle House. There are houses in every neighborhood that look like they were built on a dare. This one had a porch that listed to the left like a drunk sailor and a chain-link fence that had forgotten what it was guarding. The paint was the color of a bruise. The yard was mostly thistles, purple and defiant, little crowns on mean stems. It was for rent. Mrs. Delaney, who owned it, was a widow who knew every sin committed on the street since 1951 and could list them by date if you were so foolish as to ask. She tucked cash into a coffee tin and wore slippers to the grocery store. You can't afford the deposit, she told us, squinting. And even if you could, that baby will cry and my afternoon soap comes on at 1. He doesn't cry, Lorraine's words rising like bile. We don't let him. Mrs. Delaney laughed, so hard she had to lean on the doorframe. Honey, all babies cry. And husbands. I said, we can pay month to month. I can clean it myself. I'll pull the thistles. I'll make the place less of a sin against the eyes. And I'll bake you a loaf every Saturday. I know how to make a loaf, so good it'll make even your soap opera taste better. She looked at me like she was measuring my bones. Then she looked down the street at Lorraine's house, good and proper, curtains like soldiers at attention. Something slow flickered in her eyes. You Lorraine's daughter-in-law? Yes, I said. Well, she said, nodding, that's a discount. I signed the lease in a hand that shook. It was not much, Lord, I won't pretend, but it was mine. Ours. It had a window in the kitchen that caught morning like a child catches lightning bugs. It had a patch of dirt that could be a garden if you squinted. It had a porch where a woman could sit and listen to her heart slow down. It had one other thing, a perfect view of Lorraine's kitchen window. On the first morning in the Thistle House, I woke up before the sun and made coffee so we could not stand. I fed James and put him in a basket beside the stove. I looked out at the fence and the narrow corridor of grass that separated my life from hers. It felt like a stage, and I felt like a woman who had just learned her lines. There are kinds of revenge that draw blood. I am not proud of the thing I became, but I will not betray the girl I was by pretending I had a kind heart for the woman who gave me a name that was not mine. The revenge I took was made of little things, 100,000 small annoyances designed to make a life feel tight in its dress. I bought wind chimes, 3 sets, the kind that sound like church bells drunk on weather. I hung them where the breeze would find them at odd hours, morning and night. The first time they rang at 5, Lorraine's kitchen light flared, and I watched her silhouette stiffen. I planted rosemary and mint right along the fence, so that when I trimmed, the scent would slide through her window and remind her she did not own the air. I fed the sparrows breadcrumbs and peanuts, so they grew bold and messy on her porch rails. I painted my porch a green, so proud it made her beige look like a sigh. On wash day, I hung the sheets so they would billow right to the line of her view, a white wall that refused to be ignored. When I cooked fish, I opened all my windows and a few of hers because she never latched them tight, the way a woman who believes in control also believes in the goodness of locks. When the city came down the street measuring the distance between fences and sidewalks, I stood on my porch and called to the man, "Make sure you check hers too. We all have to follow the rules." I smiled at Lorraine through the window like a woman offering grace. Petty, yes. Ungenerous, yes. And I will go further, it wasn't bravery. It was pain dressed up as justice. But oh, the thrill. The first time she stepped into her yard and saw the bright yellow mailbox I'd painted. The one that sang against her white like a trumpet against a prayer. She called Tom, of course, and made noises men believe, because they have not been trained to hear the pitch of women's wars. "She's challenging," she said, biting the word like it was a seed. "Evie," Tom said to me that night, running his hands over his face. "Why the chimes?" "Because I like them," I said. "And the birds, and the city, and the fishing, and the paint, and the sheets?" "Because I like them," I said again, and kissed his palm where the grease had made a home. "Do you like me?" I love you, he said, and then laughed. I think I love you more. Life went on. Tom found work in a warehouse the size of a church for giants, hauling boxes and dignity. He came home so tired, he slept on the couch sitting up, head tilted like a question. I sewed hymns for the neighborhood. I watched the sky. I waited. For what? Forgiveness? Surrender? Another war? Here is where I should tell you the large tragedies that shape a life were not done with me. The small ones never are. I learned the doctor's phone number like a prayer. James had a fever that bent him in half with a cough that made the night something to get through with soft singing and eucalyptus rubbed on a chest, so small it made my hands tremble. Lorraine came to the porch with a bowl of lemons and honey and a look on her face I didn't have words for then. He needs steam, she said. I know, I said. You should boil water, she said. I have, I said. Do you want me to sit? She asked, and the word felt like a gate opening I wasn't ready to walk through. No, I said too fast. She nodded like a woman who'd counted to 10 before knocking. You aren't a burden, she said suddenly, startling both of us. You are a lot of work. But so am I. That night the fever broke. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried while the wind chimes shivered a little in the breeze. Not quite music, but not. I imagined taking them down. I imagined baking a pie and bringing it across the grass like a general waving a white flag. I imagined the look in her eyes if I did and how there would be, surely, a sentence waiting, something meant to stack on all the other things. I did not bake the pie. I kept the chimes. Time waddled forward like a goose, loud and full of itself. James became 2 and then 3, a boy made of knees and mud. He learned to say my name when he was scared and his father's when he wanted to ride high. He learned his grandmother's as a song that had a question in it. Rain, he'd say. Rain. Lorraine, I'd correct and smile. Yes, she's Rain. When our second child came, a girl soft as bread dough, I went very quiet. Labor will teach you what you really are. I was an animal with a mission. I bit down so hard I thought my molars would shatter, and then suddenly there she was, a red-faced monarch yelling her arrival. We named her Alice because I liked the way it sat in your mouth, gentle and sure. Lorraine came to the hospital with roses, and a small pink sweater she knit with a tenderness that made me ache. She set the flowers down and held Alice like a brittle thing she could make strong with looking alone. You did well, she said. You always do well. Even burdens can lift, I said, wincing at my own pettiness, unable to resist the way a tongue returns to a missing tooth. She set the sweater on my lap and smoothed it. I was cruel, she said. I was afraid. Sometimes a word comes out of a woman, and she can't call it back before it does the walking it was born to do. It crosses streets. It knocks on doors. It makes a life you never meant. I stared at her in that hard hospital light that makes everyone look like the truth. Her lipstick was thin at the corners. Her eyes had little crinkles I'd never let myself see, because to look is to admit the other person is real. I said, my wind chimes keep you up. They drive me mad, she said, and then laughed. A real laugh, low, like something had unclenched. And the paint. God, the paint. We thought we were on the cusp of something. We thought this was the part in the movie where the music changes, and everyone understands what they're supposed to understand. But life is not a movie, and if it were, I wouldn't like the director much. 2 months later, Tom's hand got trapped between a crate and a wall at the warehouse, and bones are not as stubborn as men think. They break. They break loud. I found out by the way the telephone rang. Wrong time, wrong insistence. Mrs. Delaney ran across the street in her slippers, breath like wintergreen and fear. He's at Mercy, she said. Go. I did. I left a neighbor with the baby and ran like I used to run in school when there were boys and finish lines to show off for. In the emergency room, I saw Tom pale as if the light had soaked him. The cast looked ridiculous, a white boat around a man who hated to be still. We'll be okay, he said, before I could open my mouth. Hey, we always are. I nodded, because a wife's job is sometimes to be the mirror that says back what he needs to see. The months that followed were arithmetic. Rent, groceries, heat, a little for the church because we weren't raised by wolves. I sewed. I took in laundry. I sold the record player we'd bought when we thought you could play happiness on a needle. Lorraine began showing up with a bag. Always a bag. Bread. Chicken. A scarf she said she'd never wear again. She'd sit and make conversation out of air, nothing worth writing down. Weather. The Browns. The new principal at St. Mary's, who looked like he didn't drink but probably did. She'd sit too long and leave too fast. One afternoon, she found me at the sink and put her hand on my back, like a benediction or a claim. You could come home, she said. I am home, I answered, and the words thrilled me with their cruelty. Evie, she said, and I realized she almost never said my name. Always dear, girl you. I shouldn't have said that word. I shouldn't have made a good woman feel small, because my fear kept getting bigger in my throat. You were never a burden. You were a rival. A rival. I said, for what, Lorraine? She looked around the kitchen, at the pictures taped by the switch plates, at the mismatched mugs, at the cracked bowl we loved, because it was ours. For him, she said softly. For the only person I have ever liked as much as I like myself. I wanted to laugh, and I wanted to slap the table and tell her to leave, and I wanted to smash the chimes, and I wanted to say, come in, sit. We'll make a world that has room for both of us. I did the small thing. I made tea. I put the kettle on, and the water sang, and the house filled with that soft, wet voice that says, wait, it will be good, it will be enough. We didn't fix it that day. Some things you fix like a hem. Some things you wear until they give in and become the shape of you. But the edge softened. There are chapters in a life I hesitated to tell, because they make me sound like a woman who deserves the cold shoulder of saints. Revenge doesn't sit well on the tongue when you're old. It makes your tea taste gone. But I keep telling you, I was younger then and tired and a little mean. I cut the hedge along the fence so the line was on my side, not hers. I painted the fence that was mine a color just one shade brighter than hers, so that our whole lives were a long, slow argument. I hosted my church ladies on Friday nights, cackles loud enough to turn heads half a block away, and made sure every story had a moral that landed like a coin tossed into a hat. Respect is earned, not taken. Names are given and names can be returned. Then there was the matter of the porch light. Lorraine had a porch light on a timer that clicked on at dusk, like a throat clearing. It was so regular you could set your watch by it. At 11, it went off. Neat. Predictable. A Protestant among lights. One night, when Tom was still learning the geography of living with his hand like that, I found myself awake at 1 a.m, the baby finally asleep, silence like a blanket too far away to grab. I went out and sat. The neighborhood was the kind of quiet that lets your own heart sound like someone climbing the stairs. I looked at Lorraine's porch, dark like every porch in America that night, the country sleeping and dreaming itself. I walked over. I crossed the small green that was a line and not a line. I stood on her steps and found what I knew I'd find. Her timer was a cheap thing with a wheel you could move if you were a woman who'd spend her life making the world do what it did not want to do. I turned it forward just by an hour. The light blinked on. Petty. Ungenerous. A little dangerous. I did it for 3 nights. Lights on, lights off. On the 4th night, I went out again and found the light already shining. Lorraine sat on her porch, robe tied tight, lips coral in the moon. She patted the chair beside her like we were girls and it was a ball game that didn't matter. Sit, she said. You've been turning my light on. Please don't lie, she said gently. It's such a waste of a woman's talent. I sat. The crickets sang. A train moaned far off like a cow who'd lost her calf. We were 2 women, 2 houses, 1 fence, and the dark. I thought you were afraid, I said, and then covered my mouth, surprised at my own heart for stepping out. I am, she said, of many things, of the night, of death, of losing what I am meant to keep. She picked at a thread on her robe, and of you, because you see me. The air around us was soft and close like cotton. I reached for the pocket I kept my pettiness in and found it empty. You called me a word, I said. It lives with me like a lodger who forgot to move out. She looked at the light. When I was 19, I married a man who could build a table that could hold anything except the weight of what he wanted from the world. He was good-looking and a little dumb. He loved me like a man loves a thing that proves he's not alone. When he left for the war, I thought I'd die from the emptiness he left. When he came back, he looked at our baby like she was the new war. He was not gentle. I did not know how to leave. He died young. Do you understand? I do, I said, though I didn't yet. And I'm sorry. I wanted everything that was his to be mine and safe, she said. And then you came with your hair like rain, and your laugh like bells, and your good hands. And he looked at you the way men were meant to look at women, grateful, unafraid. I didn't have words, so I picked the worst one at hand and threw it. And it landed, and I have regretted it in the quiet parts of every day since. The light hummed. A moth beat itself against it, mad for gold. I remembered the first casserole, the roses, the pink sweater, the lemons and honey. You hurt me, I said. I know, she said, and I hurt you back. I know, she said again, and smiled that thin smile I had learned to hate and now did not know what to do with. You're good at it. We sat there until the light, ironically, went off. And we stayed in the dark together, two women who had been girls and wives and mothers and each other's mistakes. There were more tragedies ahead. There are always more. Tom's tremor would come later. The storm that would take our roof. The phone call from a doctor who used the word malignant like he was saying Tuesday. The grandchild who would need what our knees had kept for ourselves. But that night, sitting in the dark, I learned a thing that is both beautiful and wrong. Sometimes revenge brings you to the same place forgiveness would, only slower and with more broken plates. The next morning, I took down 2 chimes. I left one. We are not saints. Part 3, the lessons we earn. Emma adjusts the recorder and looks at me like I just taught her a trick for tying shoes. You're making my eyes sting, she says. But you're laughing. I am, I say. I earned it. What's the lesson, Nana? She asks, and I love the way she assumes there is one because I raised her mother who raised her to believe the world has a pattern if you squint hard enough. I look at our fence. It's a different fence now, wood, not chain link, honey, not gray. But a fence is a story about what belongs to who, and what to do when the story isn't true. There's a handful, I say. Pick your favorite. She waits. Your life is yours even when it isn't easy to hold, I say. Don't let anyone name you. But don't keep a war going because winning is a habit you're afraid to break. And revenge. I sip my tea. It can be funny, I say. It can be satisfying. It can give you your appetite back when you thought you'd never eat again. But you don't want it to be your oldest story. It'll make you thin in the wrong places. Did she ever say sorry? Emma asks. I said, I moved next door so you'd hear the sound of me living. I let the moment sit. And then we laughed, because if you can't laugh, you'll live forever in the cold part. What happened to the wind chimes? Emma says, and I bless this girl for finding the right questions. I gave them to Mrs. Delaney, I say. She said they sounded like old coins. She said, you're finally going to let the air mind its own business? And I said, maybe for a while. Tom calls from inside. He forgets sometimes that she's gone, the woman who made our lives miserable and more, the woman who taught me what to do with a word meant to break a woman open. He calls, Evie, you on the porch? The game's starting. I'm here, I call back. I pat Emma's knee. We'll pick this up tomorrow. You can bring me that tea I like, and I'll tell you about the time the hail came down like golf balls and we moved every pot we owned into the hallway and made a city of tin. Emma leans over and kisses my cheek. Her lips are cool and sweet. I like your voice on tape, she says. It sounds like a woman who moved next door. Good, I say. That's who I am. She turns off the recorder. The porch light comes on because it's that time. The moths do their little mad dance. I think of the way a word can be heavier than a table and of the ways I learned to lift. I touch the wooden rail, smooth under my palm, and a memory arrives uninvited but welcome. Lorraine in a nightgown, porch light on, hands in her lap where they couldn't do harm, saying sit and meaning it. I sit. Sometimes that is the bravest thing.